Hi, so welcome. It's Yoni and I'm the creator of Diversity Adopt, and I'm welcoming you to another live stream, this time on my own. Um, and what I wanted to talk about was answering some questions that members of the group have provided. So thank you for that. Um, Before I get onto that, I wanted to just say well done to Kaylee, who got the prize for the most engaged person in um, the live challenge. So thank you for engaging, and I really hope you enjoy your book, A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting. If you're joining me either live or on the replay, please do give live stream permission to show your name and details. That would be brilliant. Right, so we'll go through some questions that I've got. And the first one is, what are your top tips for the first day or night a child comes to stay in your home? And what I was thinking about was, well, how to prepare. So maybe talking to the social worker about how it's going to feel, what the child might be looking for, what their usual routines are. And also talking to the parent if you've got the chance. And that would be really ideal to get a sense from them about bedtimes and favourite snacks. Also, is it possible to find out what the routine is, the usual routine, either from the parent or perhaps the previous foster carer? What time do they go to bed? Do they have a shower, or do they have a hot meal? Just trying to maintain some continuity in what the child experiences. And if you've got a chance, if the child is moving in and is coming into during the day, then one of the things that a lot of foster carers do is take the child out and take them to get some new bedding and perhaps one outfit and a little toy or something like that, so that they get a little bit of sense of they've got some possessions of their own. It's great to do sort of craft activities, maybe read books, but I very much think that it's important to be a bit low key about how you spend time, because it's all going to be quite overwhelming for a child, particularly the first night, and they might actually need some time just acclimatizing in their room on their own. One of the other things to think about is maybe having a night light or a light in the hall, and so that it's not completely dark unless they're really used to a very dark bedroom. And if they're old enough to tell you, obviously they can do. What foster carers are saying often is maybe leave the rules and establishing rules and boundaries and that sort of thing till the next day, rather than overfacing a child with lots and lots of rules and expectations. But also don't let them do something that you're not going to let them do. So in future, so maybe not eating in front of the TV, if that's not going to be something that you do usually. Hopefully they'll come with perhaps a blanket or something, that a soft toy that they usually sleep with, and limited screen time. I know it's, sometimes it can be a bit tempting to stick them in front of an iPad or whatever, but I think it's useful to have the same rules that you're going to have going forward, and just try and relax Now that's a big ask, but try and enjoy it and not perhaps make too many expectations of yourself or of your child, the child. So I hope those are helpful. Another question is there something you wish was more commonly known about adoption or foster care? And I think that's a really interesting question. I think there's lots of preconceived ideas about fostering and adoption, and the person in the street who's maybe not come across fostering or adoption certainly may well think that foster carers and adopters are sort of special, or they're very selfless, and that's true up to a point, but I think it sometimes can be get in the way if people think, oh well, they're too special, I couldn't do that, it's not something that I would be able to do. um and I think that a lot of people think that children in the foster care system are there because of their own behaviour, or because they've broken rules or broken the law, or because they're difficult children, and that's so much not the case. It's really clear that children come into care because of parental neglect or inability to care for them. And so I think that's a real shame. And some of um, the films that you can watch who are very much along those lines, where children are come into the family and then cause havoc, and I don't think are exceptionally helpful really to children or to foster carers or adopters. And I guess the other thing was, I think that carers, perhaps I would want them not to think that bringing a child into a family would perhaps repair their relationship in the way that sometimes birth families maybe think that a child bringing into the family will help things, and sometimes you need to do the work and you need to build the relationship before a child comes into that situation. So thanks for that. That's a great question. Um, are there any difficulties that I've seen arise for LGBT foster carers that we should be mindful of? And I think there's quite a few situations where I've supported LGBT foster carers or adopters. Um, and I think one of the things is perhaps through the assessment, just helping. Sometimes it feels a bit exhausting, but sometimes you might need to educate your social worker or your assessing social worker about your lifestyle and about some of the things and information that might be useful, because I think it's better to take a bit of ownership of your own assessment, than wait until the end when you realise that the way that it's reported and the way that the Form F is done, that perhaps they don't have a full understanding of what your family dynamics are like. And when a child comes, I think there's quite a few challenges, lots and lots of positives, but I do think you do need to think about how you're going to manage things like potentially children being bullied. Certainly, um, both my daughters in secondary school had some challenges, and we had to, as a family, negotiate that, and also to be led by them and what their wishes were, really, because they were dealing with a situation. um, it was their friends who were perhaps being insulting or using name calling or making them feel uncomfortable. And so that was a challenge. And sometimes you want to go charging into the school and complain, and sometimes that's not what children want. But they do find their own ways of navigating it. And I think that what they realised is that actually there were people that they would trust with their home information and other people that they wouldn't. And that was a growing experience for them. I think you do have to bring your children up to have confidence and to perhaps stand up for themselves, but also to challenge the schools and to be very familiar with the anti-bullying policy and that side of things in case you have to use it. Hopefully you don't, but in case you do. Um, One of the things that sort of still makes me smile a little bit, in my experience with my partner, we'd been together for about 12 years, I think. And we said, that we wanted to adopt. And my partner's family, who are West African, got a bit worried, I think, and ended up having a bit of a family intervention where we were summoned to a meeting, with some of the older family members, to talk about us adopting and the implications of it. And I think they'd always been very accepting of me, but they hadn't really had to name our relationship or acknowledge our relationship, perhaps in the way that they did have to when we were adopted. And and what was interesting was that we sort of talked about it and talked about how their anxieties about how the children would be treated and whether they'd get discriminated against or they'd be uncomfortable. And actually, after that conversation, the uncle that was particularly worried about it said that he really recognised that actually we'd be very good parents and that we'd clearly thought about it. Um, but yeah, that was a bit nerve-wracking to be summoned up to a meeting like naughty children. But um, um, if next question, and what I should have said right at the beginning is if anyone's got any more questions, then do put them in the comments, and I'm happy to answer them if we've got a chance now. Otherwise, I'll answer them later. If you have any advice and experience on dealing with setbacks in the process, and I guess that's setbacks in terms of the assessment and how that works. And I think one of the things that I do know, having overseen a lot of assessments, is that social workers tend to try and do things in the right way. They go into it with the best of intentions. Sometimes they can come to conclusions that perhaps aren't actually accurate and maybe need challenging. And I think it's really important as a prospective foster carer or adopter to take some ownership of your own assessment, to feel confident to say, well, actually, I'm not sure that you've quite understood me when I've been talking perhaps about a previous relationship or experiences that you've had as a child. Um, and I think it's important that you sort of go into it a little bit knowing your rights. So not going in sort of trying to argue with everything that's going on, but also being able to say, I'd like us to talk about that in a bit more detail. Um, in if there were significant setbacks, then I think you have absolutely the right to say that actually I'd like to talk to the social worker and with the manager, because if you're coming to a difference of opinion, then it's better to try and solve that before the final assessment is written, rather than leaving it to the last minute. Get advice as well. There are organisations like Adoption UK, myself, phone lines where you can get a bit of advice if you're not sure about something. And also, I guess, recognising that no one has the right to foster or adopt. But there are things that you can do to sort of maximise the chances that you're going to be successful, by showing that you can be proactive, that you're going to be engaged in your own learning. And sometimes I think agencies just need to know that you're really committed to it. So perhaps if you don't hear from them for a couple of weeks, then to ring them up and say, this is my understanding of what the next stage is. Do you know when that's going to happen? But without hounding. So it's a bit of a fine balance. Agencies do have to be fair, and if you think that you're going to be you're being discriminated against, then obviously you need to escalate that and you need to challenge it. And it might be that they're not deliberately doing it, that they want maybe making interpretations that in perhaps about a relationship or about previous experience or gender, race, that perhaps they don't have enough information, and you might be able to furnish them with a bit more detail and a bit more understanding about your own situation and family. And I think quite often as professionals, we have our own family norms and expectations, and you can sometimes inadvertently sort of try and layer on your expectations as a professional and how you've been brought up onto somebody else's family. And so it's just helpful to sort of unpick that a little bit. But if things get really difficult, then you do have the opportunity of asking the independent reviewing mechanism for a review, and that only comes into play if you've had a short report or a final assessment and you don't agree with the outcome, or if a foster carer is wanting to challenge a change in their registration. And that's it's a free service. It's an independent panel who, if the carer wishes to, and they can ask them to relook at the whole decision making by the agency panel. Now, what happens is that they will be given all of the information before the decision is the organisation makes the agency decision maker makes the decision. The carer or adopter can ask the IRM to review that paperwork, and so that delays the agency final decision until the independent reviewing mechanism panel has reviewed the paperwork, and that does take a few I think it takes a few months. So that's quite a big undertaking, but it can be useful. They can't overrule the agency decision, but what they can do is put a different perspective and then put their point of view and their conclusions about the process, whether it was fair, whether it took into account everything that you'd expect it to, and then make a decision or make a recommendation to the agency decision maker. And if a foster carer or an adopter wants to do that, then they would need to apply as a foster carer within 28 days of what's called the qualifying determination letter. So that's the letter that goes to an agency saying, actually, we don't to the foster carer or adopter to say we don't think that we're going to recommend approval. Or for adopters, it's 40 calendar days. You have 40 calendar days to challenge that decision. So I hope that's helpful. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about, which I probably should have mentioned in the first point, the question, is that I have done an information booklet, which is I'm just going to put it there. It's that's not the colourful. It's a much nicer looking document than I've been able to print out, but it's about planning and preparing for introductions, and it gives you a lot more information about how to what questions to ask, what things to think about, a bit of an overview about things like bumping into days, when you get an opportunity to meet the child, perhaps in a very informal way. And I'll put the link in here. So if you haven't had that and you think it's going to be useful, then do register. I'll ask you for the email and I'll send it out to you completely free. So I really hope that's been helpful, useful. And next week, next Tuesday, Keely and I are talking about use of language. And on Wednesday the 17th, we're doing children's yoga, well, children and adults, family yoga. So the details are in the group. That's 11 o'clock on the 17th. So it's a free link with Becky Shuttleworth, who is a yoga teacher. She's experienced with young people, and she also does a meditation, and hopefully you're going to come to that live, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And if people really enjoy it, then we might be able to get her to persuade her to do a second session for adults later on as well. So I really hope that's been useful. It's lovely to spend time with you, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Take care. Thank you. Bye.